I opened my marriage to cheat legally, but my husband threw me out. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, it's tough. Everyone wants her and admires her. It might just be an ego issue, but I've been betrayed before by unreliable friends and half-hearted lovers. Each time it happens, it convinces me more. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you notice every glance she makes. Ironically, this 70-second song played on an obscure FM station as I drove from Denver to Santa Fe. I didn't know anyone in Santa Fe. Most of my friends and family are in Denver, where I have season tickets to the Colorado Avalanche. No one plays hockey in Santa Fe, and my company has 6 offices in Denver. I'm in the investment business, and our new Santa Fe office will be in an apartment near Presbyterian Medical Center. Another irony, I grew up Methodist. I should start from the beginning. My name is Thomas Rexford, but friends call me Jaxie. While my friends were at Northwestern, I spent 3 years in the lumber business. Yes, I became a lumberjack, hence the nickname. I still have my gear and my Harley-Davidson, a 2005 Softail Standard in perfect condition. My ex-wife and I used to ride it often, but those days are over. I grew up in the Denver area, and except for my logging days, I've never left. After Oregon, I worked for my Uncle Mike, who owned an investment company. He got me into the University of Denver for a finance degree. 12 years ago, Uncle Mike retired and sold me the business. We had 4 stores, and I opened 2 more, increasing our staff from 26 to 31. Even in tough times, we cared for our customers and stayed strong. I mentioned my ex-wife, so here's more about her. I knew Jessica Remington in high school, but we ran in different circles. I played hockey, she played soccer and was an honor student. Our paths rarely crossed. I wasn't ugly, just a bit gruff with long brown hair. Hockey guys have a unique way of talking, often saying damn in sentences. Hockey players are a tight-knit group, and our parents usually hang out together too. We felt like outsiders, thinking people didn't care about us. That's why Jessica and I were just acquaintances in high school. Jessica, or Jess, is stunning with deep red hair, a lithe build, and blazing green eyes. She turns heads. Her maternal grandmother came from Ireland in the 50s. She could get any guy she wanted, but never dated the star athletes because they were often idiots. She hung out with a small group of friends and occasionally dated popular guys. We met 3 years after I returned to Denver from the Northwest. I had gained some muscle from logging. I was playing in a men's hockey league when she walked in. Her friend Trisha, dating our goalie Mike, had been bitten by the hockey bug. Hockey players often add an EII or XY to names, hence Toonie for Mike. Jaxie, look at the bleachers, Beamer pointed out. Is that Jessica Remington? Looks like it, I replied. I can't believe she's near the rink. She's with Trisha. Tun's girlfriend must have brought her. Being a typical American kid, I tried to catch her attention during the game, scoring 2 goals and an assist. Afterward, as we were leaving the warm-up area, I passed her. Hey Thomas, great game. Aren't you going to say hi to an old school friend? Sorry, Jessica, I didn't realize we were friends in high school. It's good to see you. I stopped, put my bag down, and offered a handshake. I'm a hockey player, not great at socializing. She smiled and took my hand. Maybe if you stepped away from the rink, you'd notice I thought you were a nice guy. What is that awful smell? Sorry, hockey bags have a unique odor. I'll throw them in the Jeep so you won't have to be near them. I'll see you later. She looked a bit hurt, but I didn't know why. We barely knew each other and I was polite. Beamer ran after me as I got into my restored 2005 red Jeep Wrangler Rubicon. Hey Jaxie, are you going to O'Connell's for a beer? Jessica's coming. She wondered if turning into a hottie made her a snob. You might have a chance, bro. Don't mess it up. As my grandpa Mitchell used to say, I may be ugly, but I'm not stupid, so I agreed to meet at O'Connell's. I arrived first, got a Coors, and sat down. When she arrived, she came straight to me. Listen, Jaxie, is that what they call you? Sorry if I pushed you away, but your bag stinks. Still, I'd like to socialize without the bag and catch up. Sure, Jess. I'd love to hear what's going on in your life. For the next 2 hours, it felt like just the 2 of us. I bought her a beer, and she bought me 2. We talked about the past few years she went to UCLA for marine biology, worked at the Southern California Marine Institute, learned to surf, but returned to Denver, her mountain home. She's now pursuing a teaching certificate to teach middle school math. She was intrigued by my logging experience and liked my Jeep. She even enjoyed the hockey lingo. I explained to her, hey Jacker, can you get me a beer? It's Jaxie, not Jacker, I corrected, pointing to our server. Since you avoided me at the rink, I thought Jacker was fitting, she said with a sly smile. Let Tun have some fun, I managed to say. She winked. Maybe before we left, we hugged, and she gave me her number. Call me. I'd like to ride Greta if you'll take me. It's on my wish list. I waited 2 days to call her, not wanting to seem desperate. Hey Jess, it's Thomas. Want to ride with me this Saturday? There's a music festival in Leadville. Screw you, Jaxie. I have my own plans and can't drop them for a hockey player. Confused, I whispered, sorry Jess. Maybe next weekend. Screw you again, Jaxie. I'd love to join you. What time? How about 9 a.m.? I'll be ready, she said, then added, hey wait, I don't know where you live. Figure it out, Jacker, she said, hanging up. It's Jaxie, I muttered. I called Toonie, who got Jess's address from Trisha. Saturday morning, I knocked on her apartment door in Golden at 9 a.m. sharp. She opened the door wearing shorts, a white tank top, a red and white plaid shirt, and black cowboy boots. A UCLA sweatshirt was tied around her waist. She smiled at my reaction. I take it I passed the test, she purred. Yes, you did. I gave her my spare helmet, and we hit the road. The ride to Leadville was great. Colorado summers are warm but cool in the mountains. We stopped to put on warmer clothes once we entered the foothills. She wore her sweatshirt, and I donned my black biker jacket. If we do this again, I'll dress like a biker girl, she said, poking me. Leadville was amazing. We enjoyed live bands, ate delicious tacos, and talked for hours. Everything went smoothly except for the guys ogling her. Some were discreet, while others nudged their girlfriends or wives. It bothered me that she seemed to encourage it with smiles and winks. Despite this, I enjoyed our time together. When I dropped her off around midnight, we talked at her door, and she gave me a friendly kiss, thanking me for the fun day. I really enjoyed today, Thomas. Greta was great, and I hope you'll call me soon. Thanks for not bringing your hockey bag. She explained that she wanted to call me Thomas, unlike everyone else who called me Jack or Jaxie. That day began 2 months of casual dating, leading to us becoming exclusive. We texted and talked daily. She earned her teaching certificate and got a job at a local middle school. After another 4 months, we introduced each other to our families. I met her 2 younger sisters, Meg and Beth, her grandmothers, and her grandfather. She met my parents, my brother Mikey, Uncle Mike, and my grandparents. After several family gatherings, including Thanksgiving and Christmas, I decided to assess our relationship and called a war council with Dad, Mikey, and Grandpa Rexford. We met on my porch in early January, gathered around a table with a fire blazing and a bottle of 15-year-old Glenlivet. Well guys, here's the deal, I began. I've been dating Jess for almost 6 months, 4 of them exclusively. I have feelings for her, and before I take any steps, I want to know what you think. I need the plain truth from each of you, starting with the youngest. Grandpa, I want you to listen and challenge their opinions if needed. Everyone nodded. Okay, Mikey, give it to me. Mikey, 20 months younger than me, always looked up to me as kids, but he was smart. He just finished his master's in applied math. He loved figuring things out, always wanting to improve them. 2 years after I returned from logging, Mikey, a senior at the University of Colorado Boulder, borrowed my bike for a week. He spent most of the time taking it apart and putting it back together, making improvements to the fuel system. When I got it back, it ran better than before. Jaxie, if this were math, I'd talk about hydrodynamic factors, but I'll keep it simple. Jess seems great. She has a good teaching job, cares about you, and doesn't take herself too seriously. She doesn't have a long list of ex-boyfriends, which is a good sign. You both show real affection, including respect, physical touch, good communication, and realistic conflict resolution. However, you'll need to be on guard because she's very attractive, and other guys will notice. My main concern is the short time you've been together. I'd suggest waiting at least 6 more months before making a long-term commitment. You're both 27, so there's no rush. Dad then spoke. You're smart and mature with great business sense. You've handled your personal life wisely, avoiding trouble. I think you'd make a great husband. Jessica seems wonderful, and I agree with Michael's caution. Your mom and I dated from 16 to 23, with some breakups that helped us know what we wanted. A little more time in courtship wouldn't hurt. He then looked at Grandpa Rexford, our elder statesman. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, sipped his whiskey, and gazed at the mountains thoughtfully. After a moment, he looked me in the eye and said, "Beauty is skin deep, but ugliness goes to the bone." Then he took another sip, staring at the hills again. It was mysterious, and I was about to ask for his thoughts when my dad's look told me to be patient. Grandpa continued, "Thomas, Jessica is a sweet girl with stunning looks. I've seen you two together, and I can tell you're in love. She has good qualities, but she also seems to crave attention. She always needs to be the center of everything, which makes her seem immature and narcissistic. She can't stay quiet and needs constant engagement, likely because she wasn't disciplined as a child. Your dad grew up in the 70s, always devoted to rock and roll music. I never understood it until one day in '79 I heard the lyrics to a song he was playing. It was Bob Seger, and the song was Hollywood Nights. Dad interrupted. Bob Seger, Dad, the song Hollywood Nights. Yeah, that's right. The song is about a young guy heartbroken by a beauty queen. There's a line, she was born with a face that allowed her to get what she wanted. He saw that face and lost control. I thought, a song that makes sense. My point, Thomas, is that Jessica can get anything because of her looks. She knows it, even if she doesn't always use it. This is the potentially ugly part of your relationship. Will she flirt with other men after marriage just because she can? Even if she's faithful, won't men still come on to her? How much time will you spend worrying? Will she respect you enough to stop? I don't know. My advice is more specific. I like the slower approach, but add one element. Ask your uncle for a 6-month vac. Go back to Oregon and work in timber, but take Jess. Be alone where she knows no one, and try to settle in. She can substitute teach so her career isn't on hold. Mike won't like losing you, but I'll talk to him. Take long walks and talk about everything. Life, work, faith, kids, fears, hopes, and dreams. See if you have enough in common. If she refuses, it's a sign to slow down. If she agrees, even nervously, you have a good foundation. Your dad and Mikey are right. She's the kind of woman who can get anything and anyone, so deal with that now. If she's ugly inside, better to know now than in 5 years, with kids in disaster. Great advice from 3 smart guys who loved me. We spent the rest of the evening watching the Avs destroy Vancouver, occasionally discussing Jessica. I slept on it and decided to compromise. I didn't want to go back to the Northwest, but needed more alone time with her. I decided not to propose for at least 4 months. There's no point in asking for advice if you won't take it. Only a fool ignores wise counsel, and I believed I had taken the best of what was offered. 2 weeks later, I took Jess out to our favorite local pub in Golden for burgers and beer. It was a relaxed place, and my hockey buddy Richie, who owned it, seated us in the back for some privacy. So, are we just casual today, Thomas, or do we have an agenda? She asked, looking gorgeous and as intuitive as ever. Or somewhere in the middle, I said. I've never seriously dated anyone before, but I've fallen in love with you. I don't know the best steps forward, but I want to move toward a long-term relationship. If you agree, I have some ideas to discuss as a starting point. Thomas, I'm flattered. You just made a lot of sense without saying damn. I've been thinking about this too. I'm scared because I'm falling in love with you, and I've never been in such a serious relationship. So, what's your plan? For the next 20 minutes, I shared my thoughts, seeing only each other for at least 4 more months, spending more weekends alone together, and having at least 2 evenings a week to talk about important topics. I suggested inviting older couples we respect for advice and making sure we are compatible in all aspects. She teased me about the last part, and I joked back, earning a playful punch in the arm. "Wanna come, handsome?" she asked, flashing her intense green eyes at me. "I agree with your ideas, and I can teach you a few things," she said with a grin. "Let me get the check and we can start the lesson right now," I offered. "How about we start with the first lesson right here," she said as we finished our beers. We rode back to my apartment on Greta. As I unlocked the door, Jess whispered, "I'm not sure I should be alone with a hockey player. I might get taken advantage of." In one smooth motion, I opened the door and said, "No way, girl." I led her to the bedroom, and an hour later we fell asleep in each other's arms. My last thought was how amazing it all felt. 4 months of investing in. Our relationship went almost smoothly. I say almost because there was a flaw I should have noticed. About 3 months in, we went to a local pub with live bands. We had a few drinks, and Jess was teaching me how to dance. We were having a blast when I went to the men's room for a couple of minutes. I returned to find Jess talking to a guy who looked familiar but wasn't a friend. He stood too close, and Jess wasn't keeping her distance. Remembering my friend's warnings, I stayed calm and ordered more beers while watching them. Jess was clearly flirting, giggling, and touching his forearm. She didn't seem to miss me at all. When Jess saw me, there was a brief look of guilt, then she smiled and said, "Thomas, you remember Wayne from high school?" Wayne smirked slightly and extended his hand. "Hey Thomas, good to see you. It's been about 10 years. You look great." I shook his hand and said hello. A couple of things stood out. He called me Thomas, not Jaxie or Rexy, meaning he wasn't a hockey buddy. Jess knew she had crossed the line. Now it was a matter of how she would react. She missed her first chance. "Wayne, why don't you join us? Are you here with someone?" "Thanks, I will. No, just here with some buddies. No one I can't ditch for old friends." "I can't believe you're Sue. There are plenty of ladies who should notice you," Jess said. She kept chatting with Wayne, never involving me or thanking me for the beer. "Why don't you spin me around on the dance floor?" she suggested to Wayne. "Strike 3. She didn't ask if I was okay or even look at me until she led Wayne to the dance floor. "Be back in a while, babe. Don't flirt while I'm gone." Wayne looked nervous. He was taller than me but seemed like a clean-cut rich boy who'd never been in a fight. I'd had a few skirmishes in high school and in Oregon. Truthfully, I got my back kicked the first week in the log industry for being rude to a redneck. He punched me up, but later we shook hands and he took me under his wing. Since then, I've learned to keep my temper in check. Wayne didn't attend our school, but he knew I did by the look in his eyes. "Do you mind if I dance with Jess?" he asked. "Of course he doesn't," Jessica answered for me, leaving no room for objection. There's no fourth strike in baseball. Wayne avoided a punching by at least trying to ask, honoring the unspoken male code. Jessica, however, was in for a rude awakening. When they returned, I was gone. I had a lovely moonlit ride home on Greta to cool down. Jess and I didn't live together. Call me old school, but I believe it's disrespectful for a man to ask a woman to live with him without a ring. It makes it too easy for a guy to take advantage and walk away. The ride home took 20 minutes, and another 20 passed before Jess's calls started coming in. "Thomas, where are you? I can't find you at home. Why did you leave without picking me up? You look like you were having too much fun with Wayne. Come back and get me now, you idiot. You're embarrassing me." "Good night, Jess. I'm sure you'll make it home." She called again before I could turn off my phone, but I ignored it. I wanted a good night's sleep before the storm that would erupt in the morning. At 7:30 a.m., while drinking my second cup of coffee, Jess burst in with her green eyes blazing. We didn't live together, but she had a key. "You son of a cow, Thomas. How dare you leave me like that? Are you such a little boy that you ran away because you were hurt? Explain yourself right now if you want me to stay." Her nostrils flared, and her face was red with anger. If I hadn't been a lumberjack, I might have been scared. "Would you like to sit down and have a cup of coffee, Jessica?" "No, screw it. I don't want to sit and drink coffee with a juvenile like you." I kept my tone calm, which might have made her angrier, but I wasn't about to argue with an irritated Irish girl. "Okay, suit yourself. Let me be blunt, Jess. I love you deeply and want us to be together, but I won't tolerate disrespect. What you did last night was unforgivable. We're not just dating, we're committed to each other. We agreed to deepen our relationship intentionally. Wayne was in your personal space, and you were open to him. You didn't ask if he was welcome at our table. You invited him without consulting me. You flirted with him, told him other women should notice him, and asked him to dance without looking at me once. Even Wayne tried to ask if everything was okay, but you didn't let me respond. How is that respectful? How does it show your love for me? You like the attention you get from guys, and that's fine, but treating me like I'm not an equal and having the final say in everything is unacceptable. I was wrong to leave without explaining, but I won't compete for you. We're past that stage. I'm yours, and you should expect love, respect, and honor from me, just as I expect the same from you. If you don't see it that way, let me know. It will hurt, but I'll respect your choice and move on. But if you love me and want to continue, you must respect and honor me. Imagine if it were reversed and a woman flirted with me in front of you. How would you feel if I ignored you and danced with her without asking?" It was silent for a moment as Jess stared at me. I thought she might walk away, but then tears filled her eyes, and her lip quivered. Suddenly, she threw herself into my arms, sobbing. I held her as she caught her breath. "I'm so sorry, Thomas. I didn't think. It was horrible of me. I can't believe I treated you so badly. I love you and want to be with you. Please forgive me." She started crying again. I held her a moment longer, then gently pushed her back to look her in the eye. She was sincere. "Jess, I forgive you, I love you, but we have to be clear and put ourselves first. I know guys will always hit on you, but we can't disrespect each other." "I know, Thomas, that's exactly it." She wiped her face with her sleeve. "I must look terrible. Let me wash my face, then let's have coffee and talk about growing in our love." 5 months later, we were married on a beautiful Saturday morning near Breckenridge. It was a gorgeous late May day with sunny skies and temperatures in the mid-60 seconds. Despite my hockey buddies' boisterous congratulations, the event was pleasant. Surrounded by family and friends, we vowed to forsake all others and live together as husband and wife. We enjoyed the day until 6 p.m. when we headed out for our honeymoon. Greta took us to the airport for our flight to Cabo. After 9 amazing days, we returned to Denver at the start of summer. Over the past few months, Jess and I have had many long conversations and walks, addressing important issues. We even saw a therapist to discuss family background, expectations, and communication. I felt I had followed the advice of the 3 men who loved me most and embarked on a journey of a lifetime with the woman I truly loved. Who truly loved me. How is it that just 4.5 years after my divorce from Jess, I'm single and driving down the highway again. I thought I had followed all the advice I received. Jess and I covered a lot of emotional, psychological, and relational ground before and after we married. I believed we were honest and committed to love, care, and respect. But that doesn't mean much if the other person doesn't hold the same promise in their heart. Jess had different definitions of these words, ones she never shared with me. There were patterns in her life she couldn't or wouldn't change, which put us at risk as a couple. Grandpa Rexford was right. Jessica was beautiful on the outside, but her inner ugliness ran deep. A year earlier, Jess learned she was accepted to teach Algebra 2 and trigonometry to 10th graders at the local high school. 2 older teachers were close to retirement, and Jess was on track to teach AP Math soon, according to her department chair, Dr. Charles Wellborn, also known as Chuck the Devil. For the first 2 months of the school year, Jess was excited. Every night, she shared stories about her classes and the joy she got from teaching math to kids. She spoke highly of Dr. Wellborn, her mentor. I didn't think much of it. He seemed like a nice guy who wanted everyone to do their best. I should have been more cautious. Dr. Wellborn was 15 years older than Jess, married with 3 teenage children. I met him in early October, expecting someone extraordinary from the way Jess described him. Instead, he was average, about 160 centimeters tall, trim for his early 42nds, with no gray hairs. He wasn't boring, but nothing about him stood out. I expected a teaching legend but met someone more ordinary. I'll save time for those who aren't hockey fans. Barry Melrose, picked 36th in the 1978 draft, played about 300 professional games, and had a mediocre career. For me, Dr. Wellborn was like Melrose, nice but unimpressive. I never understood Jess's fascination with him. I thought she appreciated his support and guidance, so who was I to judge? I listened politely as she talked about how inspiring he was. It was then I noticed that 90% of our conversations were about her work, and 75% of those were about Wellborn. When I talked about my work, hockey, or family, she would listen for a couple of minutes before switching back to her world. As a first-time husband, I assumed this was normal. I didn't mind hearing about her job or her boss, but I wanted her to ask about my life too. Sadly, she rarely did, and I never brought it up until it was too late. The week after Thanksgiving, I was on the phone with my mom. We were discussing Christmas plans when she switched gears. "Thomas, how are you and Jess?" "Okay, Mom, really? Are you sure, Thomas?" Obviously, it wasn't a question. "Yes, I think so, Mom. Why do you ask?" "Well..." Mom paused. "Mom, you can talk to me. If something is bothering you, please tell me. It's just that she's always talking about herself and her work. I've never heard her brag about you or ask about your work. That strikes me as odd. Enthusiasm in a relationship should be mutual. You're always supporting her and paying attention, but she doesn't reciprocate." We talked more, and I thanked her for her concern. I didn't agree or disagree with her observations, but felt she had picked up on my growing anxiety. I told her I would seriously consider her words. I didn't mention it to Jess right away, but started keeping a simple record of our conversations. I work with numbers, so it was easy to track. That's how I found out we talked mostly about Jess and her world. I got an uneasy feeling recalling the Seeger song, "She was born with a face that let her get her way." Jess was amazing, but she was immature and selfish in this area, always used to getting what she wanted. I decided to plan a weekend getaway for us to talk and enjoy each other's company. We used to do this in our first 3 years of marriage, so it wouldn't surprise Jess. I booked a cabin near Aspen, checked our schedule, and saw no school conflicts. I'd miss a hockey game and deal with some "what the hell, Jaxie" comments, but I'd survive. I was excited to tell Jess when she got home. After dinner, I shared my plan, expecting her to be thrilled. She wasn't. She paused longer than I expected and said, "Thomas, you should consult with me first. Charles has a mandatory faculty meeting next Saturday to discuss new curriculum ideas." Her face showed annoyance, not disappointment. "Jess, I did check with you. Our shared calendar didn't show this. How long ago was this scheduled?" The fact that Dr. Wellborn was now Charles didn't escape me. "About a week ago, I guess," Jess answered less confidently. I thought I put it on the list, but maybe I forgot. This was a first since the shared calendar was her idea. I was furious. "Damn it, Jess. You work long enough as it is, and now Wellborn thinks he controls your weekend too? That's not fair." "Thomas, Charles wants the best for our students in the math department. It's just one Saturday. We can find another weekend." "That's not the point, Jess," I replied, frustrated. "We've been using this calendar for months because it was your idea. Remember when I forgot to put a dinner with clients on the calendar? You demanded we reschedule. What's fair for me is fair for you." "Damn it, Thomas. You're making a big deal out of nothing. We can just reschedule." "I'm sorry, Jess." "You're right," I said sarcastically. Forgive me for treating you the way you treat me. Forgive me for wanting to plan a nice weekend with my wife. Forgive me for encroaching on Charlie's important schedule. She started to reply angrily, but I walked out. I jumped on Greta and rode around for an hour to cool off, which turned into 3 after stopping by the local pub for a few beers. When I got home, it was icy cold between us. We only saw each other in passing and didn't speak. I worked in my home office for a couple of hours and then crashed on the couch. I'm an early riser, a habit from my logging days when work started before dawn. I left the house at 5:30, and Jess usually got up around 6:15, so we didn't cross paths. I canceled the cabin reservation, losing a $100 deposit. It wasn't much, but it made me sad. Later, I saw her faculty meeting on the calendar, along with a math conference in January and 2 girls' nights out. I sent Jess a snarky text. Going to the rink after work, game at 7 and beers afterward. I'll be home around 11. Check the calendar if unclear. It's been there for 2 months. No response. The next week we barely spoke, each waiting for the other to apologize. I was upset she didn't update the calendar and seemed indifferent. She probably expected me to come crawling back. We were both disappointed. The following Saturday, Jess surprised me with a kiss at breakfast. "Thomas, I hope we can talk and make up today. I understand your disappointment, but I'm sure we can work things out," she said, winking and leaving without an apology or acknowledgement of her mistake. Seeger's lyrics echoed in my head, a face that lets her get her way. I grumbled for half an hour, then decided not to waste the day. The porch door had been creaking for weeks, so I took it off the hinges to oil it but realized we were out of oil. I jumped in my Jeep and headed to the hardware store. Mick's store has been around since just after World War II, staying in the family for 90 years. Mick Ive now runs it with his sons, Mick V and Eddie. I played hockey with Eddie, and Mick V only worked weekends because he taught math at Jess's school. Imagine my surprise when I walked in and saw Mick V helping a customer with a snowblower. He waved as I walked in. My surprised look must have caught his attention because he found me in Section 9 a few minutes later. "Hey Jaxie, heard you had a goal and 2 assists on Thursday. Eddie said you played well for an old man." "Hey V, yeah, it was a good night. Sorry for the weird look, but I thought Wellborn had a middle school math meeting today." "Did you quit your job now?" He looked embarrassed. "I'm still teaching, but Wellborn didn't schedule a meeting for today." He's arrogant, but not that stupid. "Did Jess tell you we had a meeting?" I kept my composure. I must have misunderstood Jess as she left. Then I had another thought. "Hey V, does the math department attend conferences?" "Yes, the next seminar is in Estes Park at the end of March. I'll be there, then hit the slopes." Trying to stay calm, I replied, "Sounds like it. 5th surprised you plan to attend half the meetings." "Yeah, I must be getting old. See you later, Jaxie." And he walked away. Distrust filled me as I paid for the oil and jumped into the Jeep. Why was Jess lying? I drove past the school twice, checking all 4 parking lots. No cars, no lights. My mind raced. I needed facts about where she was and what she was doing. I couldn't just wait at home. I went to a coffee shop, grabbed a cup, and sat in the back with a notepad. An hour later, I had a plan. My insurance agent, Pat Cook, known as Cookie on the hockey team, was surprised to get a call from me on a Saturday morning. "Jaxie, did you break your leg trying to improve your skating skills?" "Not yet, Cookie. I need a few minutes. Can I meet you at your office?" He knew from my tone this was serious. 15 minutes later, we were in his conference room. "When you suspect insurance fraud, do you hire a private investigator?" "Sure, but why do you need one?" "Cookie, this is confidential, right?" He looked offended. "Sorry, my head's spinning. I think Jess might be having an affair and I need to find out. Can you help?" "I hope you're wrong. I don't have a boyfriend, but I know a top-notch investigator. She's almost invisible, tough as nails, and always gets results. I can set you up with her. She's not cheap, but she's the best." "Thank you, Cookie." Her name was Ella Compton. Since PIs work odd hours, she agreed to meet later that afternoon. I went home, finished the porch door, showered, ate, and met her at 1. I sent Jess a note saying I had errands and would be home by 3. Ella was short, about 5 feet tall, but clearly tough. She smiled politely but spoke with a no-nonsense tone. I explained my situation. "If you want a detailed report, it will take several weeks, possibly into the new year. Since you think she's lying about the conference, it will cost you. I need $1,500 up front, and we invoice the rest later." I sent the deposit while she asked a few more questions. We shook hands and left. I felt low but knew I needed to keep up appearances. Secrecy was my only path to the truth. Jess was home, humming in the kitchen when I walked in. I kissed her on the cheek, telling her I needed a shower. I had tickets to the Avs-Preds game that night and Jess rarely went with me. I was taking Mikey and she was pleased. Before I left, I lied for the first time. Jess, I'm sorry I overreacted this weekend. I wanted us to go away, but I shouldn't have talked to you like that. Please forgive me. Of course, Thomas. I understand your frustration. We'll go soon, just the two of us. Cow to the end, I thought. The next 6 weeks were I put on a happy face at work, at home, and with family. Christmas was brutal. Jess and I exchanged gifts, visited my in-laws for lunch and her family for dinner. New Year's Eve was even worse. We went out for dinner and dancing, then spent the night in our hotel room. The physical part felt empty. On Sunday, we had dinner at Mom and Dad's with Grandma and Grandpa Rexford. As we hugged and kissed goodbye, Grandpa quietly pulled me aside. I'm sorry, Thomas, I really am, he whispered. Sorry for what, Grandpa? I asked, confused. I'm sorry I was right. How's that? He smiled sadly. I was right about the ugliness. Just know we're all with you, no matter what happens. I wanted to cry, but he saw my tears. You'll get through this, Thomas. There will be time for tears later. For now, do what you have to do. We Rexfords stick together and take care of each other. His strength reassured me I could handle it. 3 weeks later, I sat in Ella's office. She had called the day before to say the report was ready. I asked to meet at her work instead of mine. She began, I'm sorry to tell you, Thomas, but your wife is a lying cheat. If you need a moment, take it. No, go on, please. Chuck entertains your wife, usually at the Hampton Inn in Englewood. They choose that location because you don't have offices nearby. They act professionally at work and are very discreet. They drive separately to a rest stop or truck stop, far enough away but close enough to get home quickly if needed. There was no conference in Colorado Springs. They spent that weekend in Gunnison in a remote cabin. They meet about every 8 or 9 days and have met at least 6 times since you hired me. I have audio and video from their last 2 meetings at the Hampton, along with pictures and conversations from their phones. The evidence is irrefutable. She handed me a thick folder. It's all here, but I advise against looking at the pictures or listening to the recordings right away. For some reason, I stayed calm throughout our conversation. I asked a few clarifying questions, which she answered thoroughly. When we were done, I asked her to email the final invoice to my personal work address. I gathered my folder and stood up to leave. Mr. Rexford, if I may, this is the best and worst part of my job. I'm picky about my clients and avoid liars and scammers. I never help anyone cheat. I know you're a good guy who doesn't deserve this. It's tough to give you this news, but now you know the truth. You're no longer in the dark and can take back control of your life. Thank you, I mumbled. One last thing, she said. I dug more into Chuck. This isn't his first affair. If you need help bringing him down, I'll help at no extra charge. Too bad it's not the 1880s. We could have strung him up before sunset. As I left, I noticed it had started to snow, a gray gloom enveloping my world. I sat in my Jeep, deciding what to do next. 5 minutes later, I called Jess. She answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, babe, I had to go to Boulder this afternoon for a client. It's snowing like crazy, and I still have work to finish, so I won't be home until tomorrow. Oh, I'm sorry, babe. I was going to surprise you and go to your hockey game tonight. Be careful driving home tomorrow. I love you. Thanks, bye, was all I could say. I considered going to my parents' house, but drove to the Hampton Inn in Englewood instead. I parked where I could watch the entrance, hidden by some bushes. I decided to wait for an hour. While I waited, I called Cookie and told him the bad news. Jaxie, I'm sorry as hell. Thanks, Cookie. Cover for me tonight with the guys. Make sure they know the next keg is on me. I'll call you tomorrow. Score a couple of goals for me. You got it, brother. I didn't have to worry about whether my ex-wife would show up with her lover. About 35 minutes later, Chuck arrived and went inside. 5 minutes after that, Jess parked at the far end and met him at the side door, where he gave her a quick kiss. I threw up all over the bushes. After that, I drove to my parents' house. On the way, I called my dad and told him everything. He was silent, which meant he was furious. I asked him to tell my mom because I didn't have the energy to repeat the story. I said I'd be there in about 20 minutes and hung up, crying the whole way. When I pulled up, I saw Mikey, Uncle Mike, and Grandpa's cars. My mom opened the door before I reached the steps. I collapsed into her arms, sobbing. When I came to, the 6 of us were in the living room. Mom wanted to feed me, and Dad poured me a stiff drink, but I refused both, not trusting my stomach. I spent the next 30 minutes telling them the story. I hadn't read the dossier yet, but I knew enough from my conversation with Ella. Everyone sat in silence, letting me vent. I cried the whole time, and my mom stroked my back like when I was a kid. By the end, everyone had tears in their eyes. Grandfather spoke first. We are all deeply saddened by your pain. We would all like a few minutes alone with Jess and her boss, but we must be wise. Speaking out now would be the wrong approach. Let's chat some more, then adjourn for the evening. Take a strong sleeping pill, and we'll pick this up in the morning. Tonight's discussion won't help. As I told you before, we are all with you, no matter what. Everyone looked at Grandpa with wide eyes, realizing he knew what was going on even if they hadn't. No one was upset he hadn't told them sooner. They trusted him as the cornerstone of our family. "You're right, Dad," my dad finally said. Then he asked, "What should we do about Thomas's absence tomorrow? Will Jess expect him to call or be home by early afternoon?" Uncle Mike jumped up. "I can handle it." Thomas told Jess he's busy in Boulder. This storm gives him a perfect excuse. "I'll call Jess in the morning and explain that the situation is serious and only Thomas can handle it. He'll have to talk to her tomorrow, but I can assure her it will take another day or two since she's in school. She won't be tempted to go to Boulder." We agreed to the plan, with some additions from Mom and Dad. My brother hugged me tightly, tears flowing. Uncle Mike hugged me too, and Grandpa took my face in his hands. "You'll get through this, Thomas, you have my word." After everyone left, I went to the guest room, took a couple of sleeping pills, and was out like a light. The next morning, I was surprisingly calm and determined, though still sad. Jess had made her choices, breaking her vows and neglecting me. It was time for me to make mine. My family's love would help me endure, and my long-term plan was forming. By 8:30 a.m., we reconvened around the kitchen table. By noon, we had the basics of the plan ready. My next stop was a lawyer. Uncle Mike recommended someone experienced with cases like mine. At 1:30 sharp, I walked into the law office of Beach. I was seated with Meredith Beach Cochran, a pleasant-looking woman in her late 40s with steely blue eyes and a firm handshake. She practiced family law exclusively and never represented a cheating spouse. She was well-versed in Colorado divorce law. "What do you want when the dust settles, Mr. Rexford?" "I'm not sure yet. I don't want her to get more than she brought into the marriage, but I know that's unrealistic. Our prenup protects my family business in case of infidelity. I want my name clear, and I want everyone to know her infidelity is why I'm suing. I want his name public and hope he gets fired. Mostly, I want to move on with my life." "Most of what you say makes sense. I'm glad you have realistic expectations. As your lawyer, I have to ask, are you planning to damage them?" "No, ma'am, but I can't guarantee what some of my hockey buddies might do." "Good," she replied with an evil smirk. I stared at her, surprised. "Two brothers played at the University of Denver in the early 2000s, Jaxie." "I know the lingo," she winked. "Well, Mrs. Beach Cochran, it looks like I found the right lawyer." "Yes, Mr. Rexford, call me Beer if you like." "Great. I'm Jaxie." Before I left, we agreed on 3 things. I would leave the PI file. With her for review, she would file for divorce within 24 hours, and Jess would be served after school on Friday in the parking lot. This shock might make Jess react in a way that would benefit us. I would meet Jess at home Friday night to confront her and demand she leave. Since the house was in my name, we would keep the PI on Jess to monitor her behavior before and after being served. The bill was already around $5,000, which was frustrating. She emphasized staying calm, letting my family support me, and continuing to live my life as usual. We exchanged cell phone numbers for any questions. Before leaving, I asked, "Why isn't the practice called Beach, Cochran, and Beach?" She smiled. "I'm patient, Jaxie. Daddy will retire in 3 years, and then I'll be senior partner. It will be Beach, Cochran, and Beach." I texted Jess as I left her office. "Finished with this mess. On my way. I'll be home around 6. She replied, "Can't wait to see you," adding a heart emoji. I deleted the message. I went to my parents' house to update them. Mikey was there with Mom and Dad. I called Grandpa to bring him up to speed. "You're already talking better, Thomas. I'm proud of how you're holding up." At 5:30, I headed home. Jess was upstairs but came down when she heard the door. We exchanged kisses and hugs. I showered, changed, and we made a simple dinner of burgers and salad. I realized I hadn't eaten in over 24 hours and was suddenly hungry. As dinner ended, Jess began to flirt. She wore a baggy shirt, no bra, and leggings. She placed her leg in my lap. Though I got hard instantly, the thought of lovemaking with Jess disgusted me, but she was still my wife. "You may have been Jaxie last night, but I hope Jaxie takes his wife upstairs tonight." "Sorry, babe, my head is still splitting from the last 2 days and driving in the snow." She looked surprised. I could count on one hand the times I'd turned her down for lovemaking and still have fingers left. "I understand. I'm sorry," she replied, clearly disappointed. I wanted to tell her to have fun with Chuck at the Hampton Inn, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "How about we take a bath and I give you a back rub?" Still smiling, I gently removed her foot from my lap. She took a long bath and I gave her a back massage, fighting the urge to strangle her. After about 20 minutes, she fell asleep. I covered her and moved as far away from the bed as possible. The next night, I had a hockey game. She didn't suggest I skip it since I missed Monday's game. Thursday night was harder, but dinner with her parents made it easier. On the way home, she clearly wanted something, so I discreetly texted Uncle Mike. Before we left, 2 minutes after we arrived home, Uncle Mike called. "Thomas, sorry to bother you. Are you with Jess?" "Yes, Uncle Mike. We just had dinner at the Remingtons." "Hi, Jess." "Hi, Uncle Mike. We're a little busy. Can Thomas call you back in the morning?" She winked at me. "I'm sorry, but this can't wait. Thomas, Jackson's investment file wasn't finished. Tina went home sick, and we need it for tomorrow's 7:30 a.m. meeting." "Damn, Uncle Mike." I pretended to be frustrated. "Okay, I'll drop Jess off and meet you at the office in 30 minutes. "Thanks, Thomas," he replied, then added, "Sorry, Jess. I owe you guys a steak dinner at Capitol Grill." "Deal," I said, hanging up the phone. Jess looked annoyed but tried to hide it. "Damn it, Thomas, this is getting very unpleasant," Jess complained. "What does a girl have to do to get her husband in bed?" I refrained from saying what came to mind. "I know, babe, but I'm sure you'll get a break one of these days." She didn't notice I said you instead of we. She hummed and sulked for the last 10 minutes of the drive. When she got out of the car, I rolled down the window and shouted, "I won't be in for another 3 hours. Why don't you wait for me?" She didn't look back, just waved and walked into the house. "Yeah, that's right." "Screw you," I muttered under my breath as I drove off. Friday was the most unproductive day of my career. I arrived early, leaving Jess a note that I would be at the office before dawn to ensure we had an uninterrupted evening. After catching up on some paperwork and making a few client calls, I checked the time, expecting it to be noon. It was only 9:30 a.m. I told my assistant Donna that I was heading to the gym where I worked out furiously. After meeting Dad and Uncle Mike for lunch, I returned to the office for another 2 unproductive hours before heading home, arriving an hour before Jess. Just as I was approaching the front door, Jess was finishing her last class of the day. Chuck slipped into her classroom with a serious grin. "Sweetie, how about a detour on the way home this afternoon?" Chuck was charming and good-looking, but Jess, who could get her way with her looks, was getting bored with him. He was good in bed but had a job with limited prospects. He wasn't going to be rich, and he was 15 years older with a wife and 3 kids. Chuck was a dead end, and she needed to end it politely since he was still her boss. "I'm sorry, Charles, but Thomas and I haven't spent much time together this week. How about we meet late Sunday night? Thomas has a hockey game at 5, so I could meet you between 4 and 6. I'll let you know at the end that we had fun, but we're done," she thought to herself. Chuck wasn't happy but understood. Maybe he could still arrange for his mother-in-law to take the kids out for the evening. His wife wasn't as beautiful as Jess, but she looked fine. "Okay, I'll pick you up at the bus stop at 4 sharp, he said. She heard him whistle as he left the classroom. Jess was relieved she was going to break up with Chuck Wellborn. He had been treating her like a princess, but was starting to feel entitled to her. She always had the upper hand with men, including Thomas. She wasn't going to let Charles or any other man control her. After another 30 minutes of grading math tests, Jess realized she adored her husband. He was strong when needed, but also pampered her as she deserved. He was a great provider and would make a wonderful father, following his father and grandfather. Deep down, she knew she couldn't promise never to cheat again, but she vowed to rededicate herself to loving him. The connections between love, loyalty, commitment, and honesty in her brain weren't working. She didn't feel the guilt or shame she should have. Jess should have realized how selfish and narcissistic she was deep down, but she didn't. She didn't recognize her true ugliness, but that was about to change. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Jessica Rexford?" a woman asked, approaching Jess in the parking lot with a manila envelope. Beer always used women for serving papers to wives, as they were less conspicuous. "Yes, that's me. Sorry, I don't recognize you. Who are you?" "I have an important document for you. May I see some ID?" "Sure," Jess replied, feeling embarrassed and curious. She showed her faculty lanyard. "Thank you, Mrs. Jessica Rexford. You've been served." The woman handed Jess the folder, then walked away. Jess was left stunned, holding the papers. "Wait, what? I don't understand. What is this?" Jessica received no response. Slowly, reality began to sink in. "No, this can't be happening," she hissed, tearing open the envelope. The top of the page read, "Statement of Dissolution of Marriage." No, it can't be, she thought. Thomas would never do this. He adores me. He loves me. He can't know about Charles. We've been secretive. There's no way he could know. If he did, he would have confronted me. Oh God, I have to go home and make things right. She fumbled with her keys, dropped the papers and cried. After gathering everything, she opened the car door and started the engine, sobbing and shaking with fear. She tried to calm herself but was confused, having lived a life without real shocks or stress. It took a few minutes to collect herself and start driving home. On the way, she swung between hysterics, rage, tears, and back to rage. When she got home, she would tell Thomas what she thought. No one, especially Thomas Rexford, had ever treated her so shamefully. How dare he pull such a stunt at her workplace? Thankfully, most people had left, but a few teachers were still on campus, and some had likely seen the confrontation. By Monday, gossip would be rampant. She never considered that she caused her own pain. Her infidelity was the root of this disaster. By the time she pulled into the driveway, she had calmed down and decided to stay composed. She was confident she could explain her affair with Charles if Thomas found out. She planned to claim that Charles forced her to sleep with him for career advancement. She vowed never to cheat again, but she was too afraid to confess to Thomas, fearing his temper and potential retaliation against Charles. As she walked through the front door, she was confident in her strategy. When she entered, I was already sitting at the kitchen table with another folder on it, but Jess ignored it. Moving forward with her plan, "Thomas, my love, this must be a terrible mistake. Why would you divorce me? We love each other. You are my soulmate. What made you do this?" I remained calm. "Jess, please sit down." She did. "Jess, I've learned some disturbing things about your behavior. I'm giving you the chance to come clean and tell me the truth. I promise to listen without interrupting. If you explain honestly, I'll reconsider." Jess started to interrupt, but I raised my hand. "But Jess, before you start, let me make this clear. I'm going to record our conversation on my phone to avoid any misunderstandings later. You have one chance to be completely truthful. If you lie or misrepresent your actions, it's over, and I'll proceed with the divorce immediately. It's up to you to share your thoughts." Ignoring the folder on the desk, Jess began. "I don't mind writing this down, Thomas, but I'll tell you the truth. Charles Wellborn forced himself on me. He used his position of power to impose himself on me. I fought off his advances time and time again, but he made it clear to me that my best way forward was into his bed. I hated every second of it, but I endured because I was overwhelmed and didn't know what to do." Jess started to cry as she continued. "I didn't want to tell you because I thought I could handle him, and I was afraid you would jump him and end up arrested or, worse, in jail. When it became clear that there was only one single way to satisfy him, I did sleep with him, but it was only once and I hated every second of it. Today, after school, he was in my class and tried to get me to sleep with him before I went back to your house, but I turned him down. Oh, Thomas, I'm so glad you know now. You can help me put an end to his bullying. I can't prove it, but I've heard the gossip, and I think he's done it to other teachers before me." At this point, Jess put her head on the table and began to sob. Clap, clap, clap. I gave her a sarcastic applause. I was heartbroken over her obvious lies, but part of me had to give her credit. Maybe after the divorce, she could pursue an acting career. "Jess, I'm really sad, but that was an amazing performance." "Thomas, what are you talking about? How can you say such horrible things after I gave you my soul?" "Jess, you've always had a knack for getting your way with men, including me. You are beautiful on the outside, and sometimes we gullibly believe there's inner beauty too. But let me tell you what I know." I opened the file and began to lay out the case. "You've been sleeping with Chuck for at least 2 months. You meet at the Hampton Inn in Inglewood." I started to slide the photos across the table. Jess began to pale as she saw the evidence. At least 6 rendezvous in the last 2 months. There was no Saturday morning math meeting in early December, and no teachers' conference in Colorado Springs. I have recordings of your conversations, including one where you talk about how much you love Charles and enjoy your time together. So, my dear loving wife, you certainly don't look like a woman who was coerced. Your voice in these recordings speaks the truth. You had fun with Chuck at least 8 times, including a weekend in Gunnison. This only shows you are a deceitful wife who thought she could get away with it." Jess sat speechless for the first time in her life, realizing she couldn't flirt her way out of this one. She broke down, tears streaming down her face as the reality of her situation hit her. "You broke my heart, Jess. I have no idea how many tears I've shed over the past couple of months, coming to grips with your betrayal. My relationships at work and with my family have suffered. My self-esteem has hit rock bottom, and I've asked myself more than once, why? Why did you destroy my love and our marriage for some fun on the side with a school teacher?" I could see the guilt and shame in her eyes as she struggled to find the words. Thomas, No, Jess, I've heard enough, I interrupted, my anger rising. You know what I've realized? You're not worth my tears anymore. My feelings are deeply hurt, and I don't know if I'll ever trust another woman, but I'm not going to hide away. You're an ugly, selfish person inside. I'll move on, knowing I gave you my best. It's not my fault I'm not perfect, but I never deserved your contempt and disrespect. I stood up, looking her in the eyes one last time. I don't care about you anymore, Jess. Some say the opposite of love is hate, but I think it's indifference. That's how I'll treat you. You won't matter to me anymore. It'll take time to heal, but from now on, you're nothing to me. Thomas, please, forgive me. I was scared to tell you the truth. I messed up, but we can move past this. I want to be with you and only you, she pleaded, her voice trembling. Scared, Jess, really? When have I ever made you afraid? I've never raised a hand or my voice at you. If you were scared, it was only because you knew you couldn't have it all. Thomas, I won't leave like a defeated woman. You can't kick me out. This is my home too, she said, her Irish stubbornness kicking in. Jess, I replied calmly, I bought this house with my money before we married. It's in my name. We have no children, so you can't claim the house for childcare. Our prenup clearly states I keep my assets if we divorce due to your infidelity. Your looks might usually get you your way, but you should have read that document more carefully. You can't cheat and take my home. Thomas, I don't want to take anything from you. I want us to be together. Charles means nothing to me. I was planning to break up with him on Sunday afternoon, she said, desperation creeping into her voice. Sunday afternoon? While I was at my hockey game? Even if I believed you, and I don't, it's too late, I said, my voice firm. I swear, Thomas, I don't care about him. It was a stupid affair. I have no excuses, but you can't end our marriage over this. We're meant to be together. Yes, Jess, it was stupid, also selfish and cruel. But let's be clear, I'm not giving up on our marriage. You destroyed it with your affair. You burned our love when you lied about a work meeting. If you can't see that, I feel sorry for you. I'm just ending our sham of a marriage, I said, feeling a strange sense of relief. She started sobbing, realizing the full impact of her actions. I waited for her to compose herself. Where will I go? What will I do, Thomas? That's up to you, Jess. My family knows what happened and has supported me these past months. I haven't told your family, but I will if you lie to them. I won't attack Chuck Renoff, but by Monday your principal will know. I won't sue the school, but I won't hide your affair either. Chuck's wife will hear the truth if she asks. He has 3 kids, their lives will be affected, and that's on you. I'm done taking care of you. The locks are changed, I haven't touched your money. The divorce settlement is fair. Contact your lawyer and sign the papers. Now please gather your things and leave my house. Jess finally gave up. She wiped her eyes, went upstairs to gather a few things, and then left through the kitchen door. I sat in silence, exhausted but relieved that it was finally over. I'm sorry, Thomas. Yes, Jess, you are. 8 months later, I'm divorced and heading to Santa Fe. Why leave town? I need some time away. I love my family and they love me, but I need space, like when I went to Oregon years ago. I'll spend a year or two starting the business, then hire someone to run the New Mexico office, and move back to Denver. My hockey team will miss me, but I need a new adventure. The only woman I plan on spending time with is Greta. As for Jess, I heard some hockey wives took her on a fun girls' weekend when they found out what happened. She didn't have the best time, thanks to her ex-friend Tricia. Chuck, or should I say Dr. Fielding, the principal, made his life miserable, and his contract wasn't renewed. He left the state. His wife divorced him, and his kids won't talk to him. Before leaving, he fell down the stairs at his apartment, breaking 3 ribs, his teeth, and his arm. My hockey buddies were at O'Connell's when it happened. According to about 20 witnesses, it was purely accidental. Well, maybe Bob Seeger was wrong. After 14 years, I found out my son wasn't mine. My wife left with him for his wealthy biological dad. They painted me as a bad father, but my son's statement in court revealed a shocking truth. I'm a 35-year-old man, and until yesterday, I thought I had a pretty good life. I've been married to Rebecca for 14 years, and we have a son, Adam, who's 14 years old. We got married when Rebecca found out she was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but I was happy to step up and be a father. From the moment Adam was born, I loved him with all my heart. I was there for his first steps, his first words, and every milestone since. I worked 2 jobs to make sure we had enough money to give him a good life. It wasn't always easy, but I never complained. That's what fathers do, right? I always tried to be the best dad I could be. I helped Adam with his homework, taught him how to ride a bike, and went to all his soccer games. We had our father-son camping trips every summer, just the two of us. Those were some of the best times of my life. I wasn't perfect, but I always put my family first. I made sure Adam had everything he needed for school, even if it meant I had to skip lunch at work sometimes. I saved up for months to buy him the latest game console for his birthday last year. The look on his face when he opened it was worth every extra shift I worked. Rebecca and I had our ups and downs like any couple, but I thought we were happy. We celebrated our 14th wedding anniversary last month with a nice dinner at home. Adam even made us a card. It's still on our fridge, or at least it was yesterday. Yesterday started like any other day. I went to my first job in the morning, then my second job in the afternoon. I was looking forward to getting home and having dinner with my family. But when I walked through the door, something felt off. The house was too quiet. Usually Adam would be watching TV or playing video games, and Rebecca would be in the kitchen, but there was nothing. No sounds, no smells of dinner cooking, just silence. I called out for them, but there was no answer. I checked Adam's room, thinking maybe he was wearing headphones and didn't hear me, but his room was empty. Some of his clothes and his favorite books were missing. My heart started racing as I went to our bedroom. That's when I saw the note on the bedside table. It was in Rebecca's handwriting. My hands were shaking as I picked it up and started reading. The contents of that note have been playing on repeat in my mind ever since. Rebecca wrote that she and Adam were leaving me, but that wasn't even the worst part. She revealed that I'm not Adam's biological father. According to the note, Rebecca had a brief relationship with another man just before we got together. When she found out she was pregnant, she assumed it was mine. She said she convinced herself it was true because she wanted it to be true. But now, 14 years later, Adam's biological father had come back into the picture. Rebecca wrote that he wanted to be a part of their lives, and she had decided to give him that chance. She said Adam deserved to know his real father. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. I sat down on the bed, trying to process what I just read. How could this be happening? How could Rebecca do this to me, to us? I kept reading the note, hoping for some explanation that would make sense of all this. Rebecca wrote that she was sorry for lying all these years. She said she knew it was wrong, but she was scared of losing me and scared of being a single mother. She claimed that Adam's biological father was successful and could give them a better life. She wrote that Adam was excited about meeting his real dad and starting a new life. That part hurt more than anything else. I've spent the last 14 hours trying to wrap my head around all of this. I've gone through every emotion imaginable: shock, anger, sadness, betrayal. I've cried more in the last day than I have in my entire life. I keep thinking about all the moments I've shared with Adam, teaching him how to tie his shoelaces, staying up all night when he had the flu, cheering from the sidelines at his soccer games. Were all those moments a lie? I can't stop wondering if Adam ever suspected anything. Did he ever feel like I wasn't his real dad? Did Rebecca ever hint at it? I thought we had a great relationship, but now I'm questioning everything. I've tried calling and texting both Rebecca and Adam, but their phones are turned off. I even drove by Rebecca's parents' house, thinking they might be there, but there was no sign of them. I feel like my whole life has been a lie. For 14 years, I've poured my heart and soul into being a husband and father. I've worked myself to the bone to provide for my family, and now, in the blink of an eye, it's all gone. I don't know what to do now. The house feels so empty without them. I've taken a few days off work because I can't concentrate on anything. I keep hoping this is all just a bad dream and I'll wake up to find them here. Part of me wants to fight for my family. Adam may not be my biological son, but I've raised him for 14 years. Doesn't that count for something? But then I think about Rebecca's betrayal, and I don't know if I could ever trust her again. I've thought about hiring a lawyer, but I don't even know where to start. Do I have any rights as Adam's non-biological father? Can Rebecca just take him away like this? I feel so lost and overwhelmed. I've also considered trying to find them, but I don't know if that's the right thing to do. If Adam really wants to be with his biological father, do I have the right to interfere? The thought of never seeing him again is killing me, but I also want him to be happy. I'm angry at Rebecca for lying to me all these years. I'm hurt that she could just leave like this without even giving me a chance to talk about it, but mostly, I'm heartbroken about Adam. He's my son, biology be damned. I've loved him and raised him for 14 years. How can that just be erased? I've thought about reaching out to Rebecca's family or our mutual friends, but I'm embarrassed and ashamed. I feel like a fool for not knowing the truth all these years. And what if they all knew and kept it from me? I don't think I could handle that betrayal on top of everything else. There's a part of me that's angry at Adam's biological father too. Where was he for the past 14 years? Why did he decide to come back now? Did he know about Adam all along? I have so many questions but no way to get answers. I'm scared for Adam too. He's leaving everything he knows, his school, his friends, his home. Is this really what's best for him? And what about this man, his biological father? What kind of person is he? Will he love and care for Adam the way I have? The house feels so empty without them. I haven't been able to bring myself to go into Adam's room. His soccer trophies are still on the shelf, his dirty laundry still in the hamper. It's like they left in a hurry, leaving pieces of their lives behind. I'm writing this post because I don't know where else to turn. Has anyone else been through something like this? How did you cope? Is there any hope for me to have a relationship with Adam in the future? Thank you for reading this. It helps a little just to get it all out, even if it's to strangers on the internet. I never thought I'd be in this situation, but here I am. I guess life can change in an instant, and you never see it coming. Update: it's been a few months since my last post, and I wanted to update you all on what's happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their support during what has been the most challenging time of my life. Your kind words and advice meant more than you know. Shortly after my initial post, I received divorce papers from Rebecca. Even though I knew it was coming, seeing it in black and white was a shock. It made everything feel so final, so real. After the initial numbness wore off, I realized I needed to fight for my rights as Adam's father. I couldn't just let them take him away without a fight. I decided to hire a lawyer. It wasn't easy financially, especially with Rebecca and Adam gone, but I knew I had to do it. I found a decent attorney who was willing to work with me on the payments. He warned me from the start that it would be an uphill battle given that I'm not Adam's biological father, but I was determined to try. The legal process was brutal, even more than I expected. Rebecca, Adam's biological father, who I learned is named David, seemed to have unlimited resources. David is apparently quite wealthy, which made things even more difficult for me. They hired a high-powered attorney, and it quickly became clear that they were going to play dirty in court. Rebecca and David painted a picture of me as a neglectful father who couldn't provide for Adam. They brought up how I worked 2 jobs, twisting it to make it seem like I was never around. They talked about how David could give Adam a better life with private schools and expensive vacations. They even had witnesses, friends of theirs, who claimed they'd seen me ignore Adam or speak harshly to him. I felt like I was in a nightmare. Everything I'd done out of love for my family was being used against me. Working 2 jobs to provide for them was turned into neglect. The camping trips Adam and I loved were dismissed as cheap vacations. It seemed like they had an answer for everything, and I was starting to lose hope. My lawyer did his best, but we were outgunned at every turn. David's money seemed to make all the difference. He had expert witnesses talking about the importance of biological connections. They had child psychologists testifying about how Adam would be better off in a more stable financial situation. It felt like they had thought of everything. I started to prepare myself for the worst, that I might lose Adam forever. The thought of never seeing him again, of someone else raising him and being called Dad, was almost unbearable. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, just lying awake and thinking about all the moments I might miss. But then something unexpected happened. The judge decided he wanted to hear from Adam himself. I was terrified. What if Rebecca and David had turned him against me? What if he said he wanted to live with them? I didn't know if I could handle hearing Adam say he didn't want me anymore. When Adam took the stand, I could barely breathe. But what happened next changed everything. Adam looked straight at the judge and said, "I want to live with my dad, my real dad, the one who raised me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Adam went on to say that I was a great father, that he loved our camping trips, and how I always made time to help him with his homework even when I was tired from work. He talked about how I never missed a soccer game, how I taught him to ride a bike, and how I always made him feel loved and supported. But then Adam dropped a bombshell. He told the court that his mom and David had been trying to coach him on what to say. He said he'd overheard them late at night, planning how to make me look bad. They had told him to say I was neglectful, that I didn't care about his education, that I was always angry and tired. Adam said he couldn't go through with it. He said he knew it wasn't true, and he couldn't lie about the person who had been there for him his whole life. He even mentioned specific conversations he'd overheard where Rebecca and David discussed ways to manipulate the evidence and testimonies against me. The courtroom was silent. I could see the shock on Rebecca and David's faces. The judge listened intently, asking Adam several questions to clarify what he'd heard and experienced. Adam told the judge about a conversation he'd overheard where David suggested they could pay off some of my CO workers to testify that I often complained about Adam or seemed uninterested in his life. He said Rebecca had been hesitant at first, but David convinced her it was necessary to ensure they won. He also mentioned overhearing them discuss how to coach Adam's teachers to say I never showed up for parent-teacher conferences, which wasn't true. I'd always made time for those, even if it meant taking time off work. Adam said he felt scared and confused by all of this, and that he missed me and our life together. After Adam's testimony, the whole tone of the proceedings changed. The judge ordered an investigation into Rebecca and David's actions, including their attempts to manipulate a minor's testimony. Their lawyer looked nervous, and I could see Rebecca and David whispering frantically to each other. The judge took a few days to review all the evidence in Adam's testimony. Those were some of the longest days of my life. I was hopeful after hearing Adam, but I was also scared to let myself believe things might work out. Finally, the day came for the judge to make his decision. I was a nervous wreck as we all assembled in the courtroom. The judge started by saying that he had carefully considered all the evidence presented, as well as Adam's testimony. He said that while financial stability is important, it's not the only factor in determining a child's best interests. He pointed out that I had consistently provided for Adam's needs, even if it meant working 2 jobs. He praised my dedication to Adam's education and extracurricular activities, noting that I had always made time for what was important in Adam's life. The judge also expressed serious concern about Rebecca and David's attempts to manipulate the case and coach Adam's testimony. He said this showed a disregard for Adam's emotional well-being and raised questions about their fitness as parents. In the end, the judge made his decision. He granted me full custody of Adam. He said that it was clear that I had been a loving and devoted father, and that Adam's wishes and well-being were the most important factors. He stated that the bond between a parent and child is not solely determined by biology, but by years of love, care, and dedication. As for the divorce, it was granted. After everything that had happened, I had no desire to remain married to Rebecca. The judge also ordered Rebecca and David to pay my legal fees, given their attempts to manipulate the case. I can't describe the relief and joy I felt when the judge announced his decision. Adam ran to hug me, and I couldn't hold back my tears. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The past few weeks have been about adjusting to our new normal. Adam and I are living in our old house. It's been tough financially, but we're making it. Work. I've had to cut back on some expenses, but Adam understands. He even offered to get a part-time job to help out, but I told him to focus on school and being a kid. Adam has been amazing through all of this. He's in therapy to help him process everything that's happened, and I'm so proud of how mature and strong he's been. We've had some long talks about family, trust, and what it means to be a father. It hasn't always been easy, but I think we're both growing from this experience. Rebecca and David have visitation rights, but Adam has made it clear he doesn't want to see them right now. I'm letting him take the lead on that. I don't want to force him into any situation he's not comfortable with. The therapist has suggested we take it slow and maybe start with supervised visits when Adam feels ready. As for me, I'm also in therapy, trying to work through the betrayal and the stress of the past few months. It's not easy, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm learning to trust again, to believe that good things can happen even when everything seems dark. I've had to make some changes at work. I explained the situation to my bosses, and they've been understanding. I've cut back on some hours so I can be home more for Adam. It means things are tighter financially, but being there for Adam is worth it. We're slowly finding our new rhythm. Adam and I cook dinner together most nights now. We're both pretty terrible at it, but we're learning and laughing a lot in the process. We've started having a weekly movie night, and we're working our way through all the classic films I loved as a kid. I want to thank everyone who offered support and advice on my original post. There were times when your kind words were the only thing keeping me going. To anyone else going through something similar, don't give up. The truth has a way of coming out. Adam and I are looking forward to the future. We're planning a camping trip for this summer, just the 2 of us, like old times. We're both excited about it, a chance to reconnect and make new memories. There are still challenges ahead. I know there will be tough days when the hurt and anger come rushing back. But I also know that Adam and I can face anything together. No matter what happens, we'll always have each other. Thank you all again for your support. It means more than you know. Here's to new beginnings and the family we choose.
On a sunny Sunday, I drove my wife's car to purchase a couple of new lawn chairs. To accomplish this, I decided to listen to the program called This American Life on the NPR channel and got absorbed in the captivating stories they were presenting. While driving, I heard about a book on the radio that grabbed my attention, and I had to jot down its title. With one hand on the steering wheel, I searched in the center console with the other hand, feeling around for the handle. Among various items that appeared from the depths beneath the CD cases, like a crumpled honey wrapper, a folded Starbucks drink package, a quarter, and even a folding comb, I found something quite unexpected: a package of contraceptives. This surprise startled me, causing me to momentarily loosen my grip on the steering wheel, nearly veering off the road. Moments like these stay etched in memory, replaying in slow motion. In each frame, a red Toyota passed me on the left, driven by a red-haired girl with an earring. Returning my focus to the road, I noticed the speedometer showed 34 miles per hour. Dust particles had settled on the dashboard, a reminder of the passage of time. Anticipating a green traffic light, I felt a sense of assurance. Beneath the windshield, crushed beetles offered evidence of previous journeys. However, when I retrieved the CD case, its rough edges unexpectedly scratched my wrist, catching me off guard. These unusual sensations disrupted my train of thought, making it difficult to think clearly. Amidst this confusion, a question emerged. Had I ever asked myself, is this mine? Had I ever contemplated infidelity? Thoughts, unlike images, tend to be messy and bewildering. Perhaps I worried about guilt stemming from inadvertently revealing a potentially dark secret. Or maybe fear overwhelmed me. It's possible I harbored doubts about having done something wrong. I meticulously combed through every corner of the car, starting with the glove compartment and ending in the trunk. I even checked all the doors and scrutinized the seats. Finally, my efforts paid off when I found a small package hidden beneath the passenger seat, cleverly concealed in a plastic bag from a supermarket. Gently unwrapping it, I discovered a compact, spiral-bound notebook. My heart raced as I opened it and began examining its contents. The first 2 pages were blank, piquing my curiosity. As I turned to subsequent pages, I encountered a series of cryptic lists. One of the entries was crossed out, capturing my attention. Under different circumstances, I might not have paid these lists any mind or pondered their significance. However, a familiar pattern started to emerge: the schedule of my work-related trips. The crossed-out date signaled the day I fell ill and had to unexpectedly stay home. Discovered earlier, the contraceptive hinted at a message directing my thoughts toward the hotels I frequented during my trips. Holiday Inn, Quality Inn. As I pieced together the clues, everything pointed to a planned meeting at the Travel Lodge or Holiday Inn the following day at precisely 1:30 p.m. This revelation left me with a mix of shock and disbelief. I desperately hoped that my assumptions were incorrect, that there was some other explanation. Yet the unmistakable presence of the contraceptive seemed to confirm the worst-case scenario. I had to confront a harsh reality. It turned out my wife had been having an ongoing affair for 4 months. This shattered any hope that it was an isolated incident. The evidence indicated she had indeed cheated on me, and with serious intentions. A lingering suspicion grew that she maintained a secretive and elusive list. This revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. Deep down, I sensed I was on the brink of losing her, and conflicting emotions raged within me. On one hand, I couldn't deny the resentment and anger that had built up, deeming her undeserving of my attention. On the other hand, love still resided in my heart, and letting go was incredibly difficult. The daunting task of confronting her lay ahead, and the thought of facing this painful truth filled me with fear. Questions swirled in my mind. How could I move on? In that moment, I shook my head, closed my eyes, and realized I was utterly lost. Doubts consumed me. Was she involved in something illegal? Did she have a hidden business on the side? Why the need for such secrecy? What if her affections had shifted to another person, even another woman? Uncertainty and confusion overwhelmed me, ensnaring me in a tangle of emotions. Lacking sufficient information about the situation, I felt entirely unsure how to approach her and initiate a conversation. Thoughts of what she might say raced through my mind. Would she express remorse with words like, "I'm sorry, my love. I never wanted you to find out. Please find it in your heart to forgive me. I must leave you because I've made a grave mistake." Or would there be accusations and blackmail in her explanations, claiming she was compelled into an affair with an unknown person? Perhaps she'd shift the blame onto me, asserting that my absence and suspicions of infidelity had driven her to seek revenge. The potential scenarios seemed endless, and I couldn't predict what she might actually say. In the midst of this crisis, a startling discovery was revealed to me. She found out about my infertility, and in search of pregnancy, slept with my own brother. Just this thought sent goosebumps down my spine, emphasizing the depth of secrets and deception that were embedded in our relationship. Am I infertile? Why not reveal everything? I have supernatural powers as a vampire. I work undercover as a secret agent, and the nature of my mission is strictly classified. But, dear, I want you to understand that I am doing this only for the sake of my country. I carefully returned the contraceptive and the notebook to its place. When you are overcome by deep sadness, the lower part of your face seems to be attracted to the earth, as if gravity holds it more strongly. I was at a loss what to do or think. I had read enough about infidelity to understand that a woman can have an affair because of her own misfortune, and this suggested that perhaps I was to some extent to blame for this situation. My sense of self remained intact. It wasn't the end of my life. I experienced mixed emotions, resentment, anger, sadness, confusion, and in those dark hours, I wondered if I had made the wrong choice in life, if I was inherently flawed, if I needed to turn into someone else. That night, I put on the mask of a familiar person. When Sherry tried to start a conversation about a book she was reading, I pretended to be focused on work, saying that I had a difficult week ahead and I couldn't get rid of anxiety. "I'm sorry, my love, I feel a bit withdrawn." She retired to the bedroom to immerse herself in reading. Meanwhile, I was cleaning the dishes and doing household chores, even stayed here until she fell asleep. The next morning, I hurriedly got dressed, left the house, and drove without leaving the car. Made the morning call. By 10 in the morning, I drove up to the old Holiday Inn. Unlike modern establishments, this hotel allows guests to park their cars next to the rooms, bypassing the entrance to the hotel through the lobby. In moments of despair, you have to act outside the box. I must admit that I don't know how to cheat. Instinct compels me to tell the whole truth, and this tendency, as a rule, benefits me in my work, the whole truth. And this tendency, as a rule, benefits me. In my work, sharing information creates a sense of connection, allowing others to genuinely get attached to me. Or maybe they just pretend to be friendly in order to gain additional knowledge. Ideally, I hope that everything will happen according to the first scenario. However, I have long since given up the idea that business contacts can be considered real friends. "Hello?" I greeted the receptionist. "I think my wife has to meet someone here at 130. His reaction was subtle. "I suspect that she may be having an affair, and I would like to find out the identity of her companion." A skeptical expression appeared on his face. "I just want to see the surveillance footage." His doubt was obvious. "I'm afraid I can't grant you access, sir. With all due respect to you, there are doubts about your intentions. This hotel is responsible for the safety and privacy of its guests, not for your personal investigations. There is a possibility that you may pose a threat to this woman. I apologize for assuming that she is your wife without getting confirmation." As my first boss said, when I enter uncharted territory, additional time should be allocated, since rarely everything happens as expected. If my life was a detective novel, I could slip a $20 bill to the desk clerk unnoticed to gain access. But I am not one of those who resort to such tactics. On the contrary, as an experienced negotiator and manager, I'm able to find mutually beneficial solutions. The receptionist and I struck up a conversation, and soon he realized that it would be beneficial for the hotel if I watched the security monitors in his presence, which would ensure transparency of my actions, realizing that if I leave, I will be able to monitor the territory outside the hotel, and he will be powerless to prevent any unpredictable actions. Such a scenario could lead to legal consequences for the hotel. So it became obvious that in order to reduce the risk, it was necessary to keep me on the hotel grounds. I find great satisfaction in reaching agreements that satisfy both sides. As a gesture of goodwill, I treated us to lunch at Subway, choosing for myself a classic sub with tuna and for him, chicken with bacon and ranch. After parking the car on the other side of the street, I went back to the hotel and we watched the local news together at noon. During our communication, I openly shared information with him, discussing details related to the notebook and contraceptives. During our conversation, he talked about his personal life, shared stories about his family, including his nephew's imprisonment and his father's health problems. While enjoying the sandwiches, we started a conversation about fat, calories, and various eating methods, during which he mentioned his attempt to follow the Atkins diet. We agreed that the most difficult aspect of any diet is maintaining the achieved weight. It was as if we quickly became friends, knowing that our paths would most likely never cross again. Exactly at 125, she arrived. After parking the car at the back entrance, the farthest from the street, She remained sitting inside, engrossed in a telephone conversation. I could clearly see her face through the monitor. After finishing the conversation, she looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror, absently twirling a strand of hair in her hands. Suddenly, at exactly 13:30, an elegant blue BMW stopped next to her. On the driver's side, a tall gentleman with a shock of brown hair got out of the car. He walked easily to the hotel entrance, handed over the room key, and looked back in the direction of my wife. In response, Sherry opened the car door, took one last look at her reflection, and confidently walked towards the man waiting for her. As she passed him, he gently wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her to him. The hotel door closed behind them, sealing their private moment. The idea of an affair is easy to understand. We all used to be fond of it. But with effort and time, you can recover from such an affair by acknowledging your pain and recognizing the underlying causes you can choose to return. The most destructive outcome would be a connection with my worst enemy, a betrayal so cruel that it would make me feel as insignificant as the dirt on someone's shoe. It becomes almost impossible to escape doubt about the honesty of your own views or the presence of a fatal flaw in decision-making, leaving you attracted to false personalities. Perhaps you were deceived by Delilah herself, sweetly communicating with you while plotting your demise. This situation neither aligns with the best nor the worst options. It resides in the murky middle, where complexity deepens. It encompasses two betrayals, one by your wife and another by someone else. If the other party is merely a golf buddy or someone of little significance, say the husband of one of your wife's friends, their betrayal carries limited weight. They are just another disrespectful person. However, if this person turns out to be your father or brother, a close family member, their betrayal might hurt even more than if it were your wife. After all, a wife isn't related by blood, and though you might feel so angry that you could end up physically fighting with your brother, you might ultimately prioritize your family ties over your marriage. She started an affair with your best friend Tom, betraying not only your friendship, but also your marriage. Tom had been your best man at your wedding, just as you had been for his younger brother at his own wedding. You'd known Tom for 20 years, since you were 7 years old. He understood how important Sherry was to you and how committed you were to your marriage and trust. This betrayal deeply hurt you and weakened your once strong relationship. However, the understanding between you and the receptionist was clear. You shook hands, confirming that your friendship wouldn't be overshadowed by minor misunderstandings and that drink and basketball wouldn't create a divide. You crossed the street and headed for the golf course, where you got into your car and started hitting golf balls. With each swing, your ordinary clubs felt like perfectly balanced extensions of your body, and the wooden pieces became sharp and precise. Hitting the 4-iron shot was particularly satisfying as the ball soared into the air. These fleeting moments of clarity are what make golf both challenging and exhilarating. Feeling a surge of confidence, you decided to call Tom at home, greeted his wife Peg, and invited them to join you for dinner. You set up a meeting at Cyros for 7. After making the call, you felt like a winner. Just like you had dominated with the 4-iron, you called home and left a message for Sherry, letting her know you'd be early and arranging to meet at Kairos at 7. You also left the same message on her mobile phone to make sure she got it. When you arrived home at 6, you noticed Sherry was already in the shower. Her gym bag was open on the floor, tempting you to explore its contents. You couldn't resist your curiosity, hoping to find something noteworthy. Unfortunately, you found nothing of interest. You called out to Sherry, expressing your intention to take a shower as well, realizing this might be your last chance with her before things got worse. Uncertainty hung over your future, and you were determined to convey your love for her. Sherry, breathing heavily as if she'd just finished a vigorous run, snuggled up to you. Her satisfaction was clear in her voice as she praised the experience, and you both agreed to make such moments a regular occurrence. Her passion and genuine interest in you reassured your doubts, and you felt a deep connection in that moment. As you contemplated your next moves, you decided to meet Tom and Peg as planned. At the restaurant, everything appeared normal, and the bond of friendship remained strong among the 4 of you. But the weight of the impending conversation hung in the air. As you broached the topic, Sherry sensed your anxiety and offered her support by placing her hand on yours. You asked what they would do if they found out their best friend had betrayed them, or if their spouse was having an affair with their best friend. The room fell silent, and tension grew. Tom, Peg, and Sherry struggled to find words as they grappled with the seriousness of your questions. Tom's silence spoke volumes, revealing the depth of his mistake. Peg understood the truth and reacted swiftly, delivering a powerful blow to Tom's face. The moment seemed to stretch out as you savored it, reminiscing about past memories and reflecting on the current situation. You couldn't help but notice that Tom's usual witty responses were absent, replaced by the stark reality of his actions. Tom's hesitation and Peg's reaction underscored the seriousness of the situation. You turned to Sherry and posed the question of how you should respond to her unfaithfulness, leaving the decision between a violent confrontation or a peaceful divorce hanging in the air. The room remained silent, emphasizing the weight of your words. Tom realized the gravity of his actions, and Peg understood it perfectly. Tom began to explain, but before he could finish his sentence, Peg intervened with a powerful blow to his face. Time seemed to stretch again, allowing you to savor the moment and contemplate the significance of this turning point. Memories flooded your mind, reminding you of the innocent conversations you had with Tom in the past. I imagined us playing ball and fighting the cool wind behind a sturdy oak tree. In an instant, a lot of conversations overwhelmed me. Disputes about the greatest runner, about the technique of unbuttoning a bra, the eternal question of who is better to be a Formula One racer or a movie star. There were curses in the air. "Oh, you bad speaker." The sound of Peg's hand stroke him again startled him. In the midst of this horror, I was still holding Sherry's hand. Her grip had frozen. Suddenly, Peg jumped out from behind the table, grabbed her purse, quickly turned on her heel, and hurriedly left. Surprisingly, I remained calm. "Could you pay the bill?" I asked Tom calmly. "You can take the leftovers," I said to Tom, getting up and turning to face my wife. "Come on," I said, and Sherry gracefully slipped out from behind the table, following me to the car. As we walked, the first words that escaped Sherry's lips were full of remorse. "I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry," I answered coldly. "Very nice. Are you sorry you got caught? Are you sorry that you hurt me?" My anger began to build. "Sorry you ruined our marriage? I'm sorry I seduced one of your best friends. I'm sorry that I ruined your old friendship. For what? What exactly are you sorry for?" I demanded, feeling the full weight of my disappointment. Sherry's tears began to flow, but not in streams, but in real drops running down her cheeks. I kept driving, trying to stay calm. When she plucked up the courage to speak, I raised my hand, signaling her to stop. She instinctively touched her forehead and closed her eyes, choking on sobs. I stopped the car. "You can come out," I said firmly. Sherry looked out the window and realized that we were in front of her parents' house. "No," she said almost with a groan. "Come out. Get out or I'll throw you out," I warned, tapping the steering wheel impatiently. Disappointment gripped me, and I suddenly flushed. "Get out!" I shouted, refusing to look at her as I drove away. When I arrived home, my initial plan was to pour myself a strong drink and mindlessly watch TV until sleep overcame me. But then something clicked in me. I opened Sherry's closet, overcome with a lot of emotions and uncertainty, and I was fixated on her clothes. I started tearing off hangers with a barbell, desperately grabbing buttons, trying to tear the seams. Anger grew within me, and I headed to the kitchen, returning with a chef's knife. Fueled by passion, I forcefully cut her clothes, slicing through the fabric with the knife. Drink had taken over me, pushing me to act on impulse. I impulsively lit a fire in the fireplace and tossed our wedding album into the flames. In a fit of rage, I collected a handful of her underwear one by one and tossed them into the fire, captivated by the sight of each piece catching fire. Afterward, I settled into an armchair and watched a classic football match absent-mindedly until exhaustion finally overtook me, and I fell asleep. Those hours were agonizing, filled with a sense of significance in every passing moment, yet none of them brought any comfort. I felt crushed, drawn toward the dark side of my emotions. I now understood the power of autosuggestion and the destructive tendencies of jealousy. I saw that beneath the surface of love, anger could run equally deep. The following morning brought a sense of calm. The house appeared tidy, except for the mess in the bedroom. The remnants of Sherry's torn clothes lay scattered on the floor around her closet. I left them there, along with the remains of the fireplace, the charred remains of our wedding album, the burnt bras, and the remnants of a nightgown. My mind felt empty, devoid of coherent thoughts. Driven by anger, I went to take a shower, letting the water cascade over me. In that moment, memories of our intimate moments from the previous night flashed through my mind. I realized that my life had undergone an irreversible change, yet strangely, I didn't feel strongly about it. In light of recent events, I decided to have a direct conversation with Tom about our situation. I called him on his mobile phone, and to my surprise, he answered and immediately apologized. He admitted that it all began as harmless flirting that spiraled out of control. He assured me that there was nothing more to it, but he did confess to running into her at the mall once, and from there, things escalated. It was an impulsive mistake he deeply regretted. Listening to him, I sensed that he wanted to say more, so I patiently waited. It became clear that neither of them had intended for Peg and me to find out about their affair, but they couldn't resist their attraction, and it continued despite their guilt. In that same moment, a decision solidified within me. I knew exactly what to do in this situation. Tom, our friendship is over because of this. I don't care what happens between you and Peg. You're out of my life completely. You no longer exist in my world. Goodbye, Tom. With those final words, I abruptly ended the call while Tom was still speaking. In that moment, when Tom genuinely expressed his regret for hurting me, I felt the sincerity in his words. He had succumbed to his own weaknesses and chosen the wrong path. The betrayal ran deep, and it was clear that our friendship could not be salvaged. I was left to fend for myself because Tom had chosen to betray me. Without informing Sherry's parents, I headed to their house. When I knocked on the door, her father greeted me with a sad and anxious expression. "How are you holding up?" I asked, concerned, as I stepped onto the porch. He partially closed the door behind him and let out a heavy sigh. "She told us," he admitted, his voice tinged with darkness. "You know she loves you, right? You should know that." He searched my eyes for some sign of understanding, shaking his head. "How foolish she is. It's unbelievable that I resort to such derogatory expressions when it comes to my own daughter. Foolish. I can't believe I'm saying these words about her, but it's foolish." The meaning was clear despite his scattered thoughts. He was fully aware of what he was saying. "Sherry made a mistake. A significant one, but still just a mistake. With effort and time, we can get past it. Foolish. So foolish. The name-calling might persist, but we have to overcome it." "Can I come in?" I asked Sherry's father. "My foolish daughter is in the kitchen." As I sat down at the kitchen table, I struggled to find the right words. Sherry looked pale, her eyes swollen from crying. Her mother stood silently beside her, and her father sipped water from a glass in small sips. Finally, I took a deep breath and outlined my decision. "Here's what I've decided," I began, and Sherry nodded, her face reflecting the pain I had felt the day before. "I'm going to file for divorce. There's no point in discussing the possibility of saving this marriage." The weight of her betrayal hung in the air. "You betrayed me, our marriage, and everything I believed in you. I've made a firm decision. I don't want to be married to you anymore. The pain you've caused me is immeasurable, and I doubt you'll ever fully grasp the extent of what you've done. I know you love me, and it's because of that love that I'm choosing to divorce you. I want you to feel the pain of losing me and live with that burden." In a moment of emotional turmoil, she made a guttural sound. It's really unsettling how similar the sounds we make in moments of pain are to the sounds of pleasure. But let me clarify my further intentions. Are you listening, Sherry? I asked, seeking some form of acknowledgement. Sherry didn't respond verbally but lowered her head in silent agreement. As soon as the divorce is finalized, and that won't happen quickly, we can consider the possibility of rekindling our relationship. But there's one condition. You must prove that you're a good person, and then we can start dating again. I looked into Sherry's eyes, recognizing the sadness and pain etched on her face. I want you to understand that I once loved you, and now I'm giving you the opportunity to make me fall in love with you again. But know that I'm not going back. This marriage is now history. If you truly love me, you'll do your best to win me back. Sherry nodded, her lips tightly pressed together as she contemplated the weight of my words. During the divorce, Tom was no longer considered my friend, and I hardly spoke to Sherry. We sold our apartment, and Sherry moved back in with her parents. While I searched for a new apartment, I ran into her father only a few times, and our conversations were casual and superficial. I didn't inquire about Sherry, but in these brief meetings, I made it clear that our agreement still stood. The divorce was officially finalized in just 4 months, a little less time than Sherry had spent in an affair with Tom. Peg reached out to me twice after the restaurant incident, but I told her about the divorce from Sherry and made it clear that I would only consider rebuilding our relationship if she distanced herself from both Tom and her own actions. To my surprise, Peg didn't attempt to contact me again. Instead, through mutual acquaintances, I learned that she and Tom sought counseling for their relationship, while I embarked on a vacation filled with adventure, engaging in activities like hiking and rock climbing in Chile. I thoroughly enjoyed it, as physical activity served as a therapeutic escape, clearing my mind completely. Upon my return, I found a message from Sherry on my work answering machine, inquiring about our conversation. As I rode in a taxi home from the airport, I decided to call her. I dialed her number and greeted her with a casual hello. The whole affair with infidelity and divorce had forced me to be more direct in my actions. I wondered whether she would call me. After informing her of my recent return to the city, I asked if we should continue the conversation. I proposed meeting and asked when she would be available. "What are you doing this afternoon? Would you like to grab a drink?" I suggested. When I arrived at the agreed-upon location, I saw her waiting in a booth, placing a glass of water in front of her. I took a seat and joined her. Our eyes met, and I nodded in greeting. I chose not to waste words, getting straight to the point. "Shall we discuss this further? Is there anything you want to say or suggest?" I asked, genuinely interested in her intentions. "I want to give this a chance," I added, emphasizing my desire to move forward. Curious about her own desires, I inquired, "What do you want?" Leaving no room for ambiguity, I sensed the tension building within her. She closed her eyes for a moment, seemingly pondering her next words. "Should I apologize? What should I do?" she finally asked, seeking guidance on the way forward. "I should also mention that I'm expecting a baby," she whispered, her words causing my eyes to immediately fall to her stomach. It became evident that her dress was deliberately loose, probably to conceal the pregnancy. The problem was, I didn't know whose child it was. After this revelation, Sherry began to cry. I was in such shock that I couldn't find any words. I silently took her hand and escorted her to a clinic for a DNA test. I was too bewildered by this unexpected news to think rationally. "Does Tom know about your pregnancy?" I asked as we drove to the clinic. In a trembling voice, she replied that Tom had ignored her message about the pregnancy. I was ready to explode with anger at that pathetic excuse for a man. We remained silent for the rest of the journey. After the DNA test, I took Sherry back to her parents' home, and I awaited the results with a sense of anticipation. Almost all night, I lay awake, unable to sleep, tossing and turning in bed. In the afternoon, I received a call from the clinic informing me that the DNA test results were ready. I quickly hopped into my car and drove to the clinic, and what I discovered was incredibly distressing. I was not the father of the unborn child. I sat in the car for about an hour, overcome with sorrow and tears. It's all settled now. Sherry and I can't be together anymore. I conveyed this news to her via a text message, also attaching a photo of the DNA test result. After sending this message, I received numerous calls from Sherry, but I didn't want to engage in conversation with her or see her again. I also made a serious decision to purchase a house far away from Sherry and Tom, in an effort to leave the past behind once and for all. It's been 7 months since I blocked Sherry and all our mutual acquaintances. I bought a small house and try my best not to dwell on the past with Sherry. My work and involvement in sports help me with this. I have a girlfriend with whom I spend weekends away from work, and we have a great time together, but I'm not looking for anything serious at the moment. Recently, I learned about Sherry's and her child's fate from my parents, and it brought me to tears, as I couldn't overcome the pain. Following my message, Sherry became hysterical, which eventually led to a deep depression. She even refused to eat and spent entire days in bed. Due to this emotional breakdown, she gave birth to a premature baby girl who was diagnosed with Down syndrome. Now Sherry is raising the child on her own, living with her parents, who assist her with everything.
Am I the a-hole for keeping an inheritance that came from my ex-husband's family who were against his sexuality? I'm a 33-year-old woman and I married my childhood best friend, John, who was also 33 when we were 22. We both knew he was gay, but we decided to get married for various reasons, like tax benefits and convenience, and to keep his family from discovering the truth. I had a good relationship with his family, who genuinely cared for me. John's family financially supported us both, especially during his medical school years while I didn't have a job. Instead, I took on the role of a full-time caregiver for his grandparents, who were 85 and 87 years old and dealing with multiple health issues when we first got married. John's family continued to provide financial support as he pursued his medical degree. 3 years ago, John came out to his parents, and we ended our marriage. However, we chose not to disclose that I had known about his sexuality all along. His parents completely cut ties with him when he moved in with his boyfriend, essentially disowning him. We decided not to inform his grandparents about his sexuality, considering their fragile physical and mental state. Although John's visits with his grandparents became less frequent after the divorce due to his strained relationship with his family, I continued to care for them. On the other hand, I had dedicated so much time to being the primary caregiver for his grandparents that, firstly, I lacked training for another career to support myself. Number two, thought it made sense for me to continue caring for them, especially since their health was rapidly deteriorating and I didn't want them to struggle with too many changes. So, I moved into their grandparents' home with them, all while I was upset with how John's parents had treated him. However, I still had a deep affection for his grandparents, who had always been kind to me. Unfortunately, they both passed away within a few weeks of each other. Surprisingly, his grandfather left most of their entire estate to me, which amounted to about $12 million in assets. John and his mother each received around $50,000. John and I had a conversation about it, and we both believed it was fair for him to receive a larger share. We were content and satisfied with the way we divided the inheritance. On the contrary, his parents had expected to receive the majority of the inheritance and accused me of mistreating his grandparents and manipulating them into leaving almost everything to me. They had assumed they would be the beneficiaries of the estate. They also argued that they would have been furious if they had known John was using their money to, as they put it, fund his lifestyle. Honestly, I hadn't even considered their will when his grandparents passed away. It never crossed my mind. But I firmly believe John deserves this money, especially given how poorly his parents treated him. John also tells me that I deserve to be taken care of, considering I spent over a decade caring for his grandparents. Are we in the wrong for keeping the inheritance, especially when his parents had made plans based on their assumptions about it? In my opinion, I don't think I'm at fault in this situation. I came across a comment that expresses a viewpoint I agree with. The comment goes like this: even if John's parents were decent people, OP spent a decade caring for them and deserves whatever they felt was right to give her, which in this case, I agree with. She devoted her 20s to them and was there until the end. That's more than what John's mother can say she did for them in the last 10 years. Story 2. I'm a 40-year-old married father with one child. In 2020, my mom passed away unexpectedly, leaving her retirement accounts and cash proceeds from a house to me as the beneficiary, totaling around $650,000. My wife and I are financially stable, with good jobs in our own home. I hired a lawyer to handle the probate process because I had no knowledge of her end-of-life plans, and there was no explicit will. While we had discussed end-of-life matters, I was very uncomfortable talking about it with her because I didn't want to think about her passing. As I navigated through the probate process, I discovered that she had accounts, but I couldn't access them until the courts officially declared me as the family representative. I assumed that the probate process would divide our mother's assets equally among my brothers and me. To avoid any suspicion of wrongdoing, I openly shared with my brothers the total amount of assets our mom had. However, when the courts appointed me as the family representative, I discovered that all of our mother's money had been designated to go to me, leaving nothing for my brothers. On paper, my middle brother had distanced himself from our mom for 12 years due to his anger over her struggles with alcoholism. I had made efforts to reconcile them, but it proved fruitless. Our mom was stubborn and didn't take kindly to being confronted about her drinking problem. My brother resented what he perceived as missed opportunities in his 20s because of his strained relationship with our mom. My relationship with this brother has always been shaky because he consistently mishandles his six-figure income and frequently borrows money from me. When our mom passed away, I gave him her car, which was valued at $10,000, along with $10,000 in cash in 2021 and another $10,000 in cash in 2022. However, he's facing financial troubles again despite my attempts to assist him, and he strongly resents me for managing our mother's finances. I suspect that he either has a severe gambling problem or is misusing his prescription ADHD medication. My youngest brother has been diagnosed with schizophrenia, but he's living independently, although he frequently stops taking his prescribed medications. His finances are overseen by a fiduciary. He's a disabled former veteran, and his entire living expenses are covered by a settlement he received from the Army, along with his disability check. I personally provided him with $10,000 through his fiduciary, but I haven't maintained much contact with him due to his unstable behavior. When he's taking his prescribed medication, he manages reasonably well. However, he consistently mishandles his weekly allowance and often clashes with his fiduciary. He also uses illegal drugs, and for a whole year he refused to even buy groceries for himself. Every Friday he receives a cash allowance of $150 from the fiduciary, only to gamble it all away on the same day. I'm concerned that if he were to receive a lump sum of money, it could lead to dire consequences, including his potential demise. My brother certainly believes I'm in the wrong. I'm trying to respect our mom's wishes and safeguard this significant windfall, which would likely be squandered at the casino or on drugs. I don't believe I'm at fault here. Story 3. My husband Jack and I tied the knot later in life, both of us being in our 50s. It was a second marriage for both of us. Jack has 3 children, while I don't have any biological children of my own. Nevertheless, I have a strong bond with my former stepson, Thomas, whom I helped raise. We were both financially well off, with Jack being more affluent than me. Jack was the owner of his own business and made it clear that he intended to pass the business on to his children. Before our wedding, we signed a prenuptial agreement that essentially stated we'd each retain what we brought into the marriage. Although we maintained separate finances, we both contributed to a joint account dedicated to covering household expenses, which we split evenly. Around the same time, we also created our wills. Jack decided to leave his assets to his children, while I chose to leave mine to Thomas. We were both aware of each other's decisions and were comfortable with them. However, Jack's business suffered a significant setback about 4 years ago. He desperately tried to save it and invested most of his savings. But unfortunately, he ended up losing nearly everything. This was a devastating blow to him. In terms of our living standards, not much changed, except that I started covering 100% of our household expenses. I love Jack, and I'm perfectly fine with this arrangement. Recently, I had a health scare which made me realize that if I were to pass away, Jack would be left with nothing, since my will currently leaves everything to Thomas. I discussed with Jack my intention to update my will. My plan was to set aside a third of my assets in a trust for Thomas's children. There are 3 parts to how I plan to distribute my assets: 1/3 directly to Thomas, 1/3 in a trust for Jack, and the remaining 1/3 going to Jack as a generous monthly stipend. However, upon Jack's passing, the assets held in the trust would ultimately pass on to Thomas. This arrangement is because I want to ensure Jack's well-being while he's alive, but my priority after his passing is for the assets to benefit Thomas, not Jack's children. Jack is extremely upset that his children won't receive anything from my estate. He repeatedly emphasizes that I have 3 stepchildren, not just 1. He questions why his kids are being excluded while Thomas receives everything. It's important to note that when Jack and I got together, his children were already grown, with one of them having their own child and another being married. Aside from occasional holidays, I haven't lived with Jack's children. Biologically, he's not the father of Thomas, but I consider Thomas my son in every meaningful way. While I have a cordial relationship with Jack's children, we aren't particularly close. Jack is now threatening to leave me over this issue, claiming that my decision reflects a lack of care for his kids and, by extension, for him. I've expressed that I disagree with this interpretation and that I don't respond well to ultimatums. It's worth noting that we had originally planned to keep our assets separate even before we got married. However, now that Jack is facing financial difficulties, he's suddenly insisting that I leave my money to his children. I'm unsure if I'm in the wrong for not wanting to make this change. And I believe this one has to be a not the a-hole situation because they initially agreed to keep their expenses separate, which essentially confirms their decision. However, please feel free to share your perspective if you disagree with me or have a different viewpoint. I'd appreciate hearing your opinion. Story 4. We still have one more story to cover in today's video. I hope everyone is enjoying this and having a wonderful day. Let's move on to the final story. Recently, my wife's best friend Vanessa and her husband James were convicted of a serious fraud and are awaiting sentencing in a couple of weeks. It's possible that as part of their sentence, they may lose many of the items they purchased with the illegal money, including their cars, some artwork, and Vanessa's extensive collection of expensive clothing. Vanessa, in particular, is reluctant to part with her wardrobe. Given my profession in construction, I own a van. Vanessa has asked my wife if we could borrow my van to transport her clothes to a remote storage location. She wants me to drive the van and store her clothing there. Their rationale is that while the police might trace their cars, they won't be able to retain those, but Vanessa is unwilling to part with her clothing collection. Vanessa's clothing collection is untraceable, so they believe they can keep it without any issues. Vanessa's intention is to retain her clothes for when she's released from prison. I informed my wife that I couldn't participate in something that might lead to both of us getting arrested. She argued that the clothes are not being monitored and the chances of the police pursuing us are minimal. In response, she accused me of being unkind for refusing to assist a woman facing years in prison. However, I don't consider my stance as unkind at all. Regardless of the size of the risk, it's still a risk. My wife and I have jobs and 2 children to support. And any trouble with the police could have devastating consequences for our lives. Am I in the wrong here?